Today we are interviewing Nancy Ambrose King.
Dr. King is a very well-known and widely respected oboe player and oboe teacher. She's written a book about reed making. It is available on iTunes. It is called Making Reeds Start to Finish with Dr. Nancy Ambrose King. Now that's something to crow about.
What would you say are some of the more common reed making errors that you've seen students make over the years?
Yeah, I think not having a sharp enough knife, not having a bright enough light. Those are two very easy things to always make sure are taken care of. I think also students get too much in a hurry with making reeds, especially if they're in a little bit of a bind and they don't have a reed that they're happy with, then they just start scraping like crazy, digging too deep, trying to make a reed in a hurry, and then they get more frustrated because that one's not going to work either. I think that having the three sections of the reed, the tip, the heart, and the back, communicate with each other is really important. So I think that when we're learning how to make reeds, we're very aware of the tip and how the tip should look and the gradation of the tip, maybe how thick the heart should be, how much windows do you want in the reed, how deep, and the communication, how we get from the tip to the heart and how we get from the heart to the back. That's, I think, the real art.
If you were to pick three things that are the most important in reed making, what would they be?
Well, I think personally a reed that is responsive and in tune generally will have a nice tone, because if the reed is responsive and it's in tune, then that balance is there. Right. So all three parts of the reed are functioning with each other, and therefore the reed is going to sound pretty good. If you try and make the reed for tone first, then chances are you don't have that balance, and that's where you're going to get into trouble.
One of the problems that a lot of players and reed makers struggle with is balancing their time between reed making and practicing. How do you handle that?
That's a great question, because I think that it's very easy for reed making to creep into our practice time. We start practicing, and then the next thing we know, we're scraping on the reed, and then our practice time really suffers. So I think it's really important to separate the two, make reeds when it's reed making time, and practice when it's time to practice. Of course, how far off a big performance is, a concerto or a recital, is going to affect how much time is spent learning the music and practicing versus finding that reed for the performance. If you have reeds that are in all different stages in your case, so you have finished reeds that are definitely ready to perform on. If you have reeds that are almost finished, playable, but maybe not performance ready, those reeds are great for practicing because they're usually a little bit hefty, they're good for your embouchure, and it breaks in the reed at the same time it's keeping you in shape.
Do you have any advice for beginning reed makers?
I do think it's important to start making reeds relatively young. So I was 12 years old in 7th grade, and it takes a long time to learn to make a reed, and the earlier we start, the more comfortable we are with it. Start early and not be afraid to just hop in there. And I think young students are so worried about the reed making process and thinking that it's rocket science or something. I mean, a lot of it is just experimenting with your teacher's help, of course. When I was in 7th grade, I played on my teacher's reeds, Mr. Mariotti, and it was the night before our solo and ensemble contest, the middle school contest, and I was playing a Cimarosa concerto or something. My reed just wasn't working at all. And when you're 12 years old and you're going to play the next morning, that's a pretty big crisis. Yeah. I didn't have a knife yet. I mean, I hadn't started making reeds. And my mother, bless her heart, she said, "Well, you've seen Mr. Mariotti scrape on your reeds. Why don't you just try it yourself?" And she gave me a paring knife from the kitchen. And that was the first time I ever scraped on a reed. She gave me a paring knife, and I took that reed and I just sort of brushed it. I probably just took a layer of cane off, very little.
And how did that work?
And it worked great.
Amazing.
I mean, maybe it was psychological, but I felt like I had control. I felt that, okay, my reed's working now, whether I did anything or not to it. But yeah, I think my mom did a pretty cool thing at that point. It was just to give me the control. You've seen your teacher do it, give it a try.
How about some advice for more advanced reed makers?
Well, some things we already mentioned about not being in a hurry and making sure that every day has reed making time, and also to have reeds in different stages at all times so that you're always able to get a reed in a hurry if you need one. We're going to get into some slumps where our reeds aren't working. And as an advanced reed maker, we have so many things that it could possibly be. There could be the cane, something could be wrong with the gouge, our shaper tip might be wearing thin and narrowing down. Or we could have just gotten away from the ruler and our measurements are different. First of all, the best piece of advice is that we never outgrow the ruler. So I've been making reeds for 45 years now, and I still have that ruler right there, and I'm always looking at when I tie it on, I always make sure I'm at 47, and I generally look and make sure I'm starting the tip where I like to start the tip, which is 66. And then if students are having trouble with reeds and they have a string of reeds that aren't working, 5 or 6 or 7 reeds in a row that just are not turning out, take one variable at a time and change it. So the easiest thing is the cane. Get a different batch of cane. Borrow someone else's cane. If the reeds still aren't working, go to the next one. The gouge. Try someone else's gouge. Borrow a gouge. If the school has several, try another one. If that's still not working, try someone else's shaper tip. Being very analytical, scientific about it, and making sure that they know exactly which thing they're changing.
And one last question, do you color code your reeds?
For different cane, I'll have different colors of reeds for different gouges. The school has several gouges. I have 3 or 4 or 5 gouges at home. So I generally have different colors for different pieces of equipment. But then sometimes I forget which color is which, so I have to write it down. When it all comes down to it, we as oboe players, we need to embrace the reed making process. We need to understand this is part of our life. We chose the oboe, and reeds are a very integral part to what we do. Embracing it, not fighting it, realizing that sometimes we're not going to have the best reed and we have to walk out on stage anyway, and we have to be able to play on reeds that maybe aren't ideal from time to time. Unfortunately, I do think that more people quit playing the oboe for reed making issues than for the instrument itself. Their frustration with making reeds can get the best of them, and it has to all of us as well. The skill to make a reed is, of course, crucial. The skill to get up there and play on the reed we made is even more important.
Now that's something to crow about.